Coming up this time, more classic Cloughie stories.
When you interviewed Cloughie, you didn't have a plan. It was ridiculous because if you had a plan of questions, you'd be ripping them up. I mean, sometimes you'd be talking to him and it would go on to politics.
Yes.
And we'd be talking about how we need more bobbies. One of his big things, we need more bobbies on the beat.
Yes, interviewing Cloughie was always a memorable encounter.
I went along and I was hanging around for ages, as you often did. And then eventually he came out and said, young man, come in. And he said, would you like a drink? And I said, I'd like a cup of coffee, please. He said, very good, young man. It was rather like being called in front of the headmaster. You're a naughty schoolboy. Yes. You're called in front of the headmaster.
And all the emotion of a tearful final meeting.
We had a long chat, and he said, it's lovely to meet you again. I was just about moved to tears because it was just wonderful to meet up with him. He was so warm and kind to me during that, and then it wasn't so long after that he passed away. So that made it even sadder for me.
Welcome along to the Green Jumper podcast with myself, Marcus Alton, the editor of the tribute website brianclough.com. My guest today is a former TV sports reporter who probably spent more hours than he cares to remember waiting outside Brian Clough's office for an interview. It's a big hello to Dennis Coath.
Hello, Marcus. Great to join you.
Yeah, good to have you along, Dennis. And I wondered, did you really need a sleeping bag for when you were waiting outside Clough's office all those years ago?
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Cloughie was the master of mind games before Alex Ferguson or anybody. And he liked to keep you guessing. He was very good at it. And when you went to do an interview with him, you didn't know what mood he'd be in. He'd either be delighted to see you and welcome you straight in, or he'd keep you waiting for a long time. And sometimes that could be a very long time. You're waiting outside the office and then he'd eventually appear. And sometimes he'd give you a very quick and succinct interview. And other times you couldn't get away. He'd be telling you stories and it'd be just listening to him tell stories was wondrous. So you never knew. So he kept you guessing. He was the master at it.
Yeah. How did it go in those days? Because there were no official press conferences then, were there? No. Was it just a case of turning up and hoping for the best?
In some ways it was, because you tried to fix up an interview through his secretary or whoever. And usually on a Friday, if you got down there for about 12 o'clock, he was around. And he did, and you never knew whether he's going to do interviews or what. But that was the magic of it, because he did keep you guessing, and he was well worth waiting for because he was such a brilliant interviewee. I mean, he was just the best. Everything he said was sort of the pearls of wisdom.
Did he give you some golden moments?
Oh, so many. Even advice about things and talking about football. He told me I learned so much from him and Peter Taylor. I learned everything. The way they handled people was really exemplary. They were so clever at handling the players. It was the most brilliant double act, the way they handled the players, in that Peter Taylor would probably bust them up with a few jokes. Then Cloughie would come in a bit tougher and say, right, big game today. And they had that famous cliche, this is the ball, treat it kindly. And he always used to say to me, it's about the ball, passing the ball from one man to the other. It's a simple game. Cloughie always used to stress that to me. People overcomplicate. It's a simple game. You pass to a man in the same coloured shirt, you work your way up the field and put the ball in the net. And it was all sort of little golden moments like that where you learnt about the game. And he was very astute tactically. A lot of things other managers have done recently even. Cloughie did it, but long before then, like having a one-man centre forward, having just one striker up front. That wonderful European Cup victory over Hamburg when Gary Birtles played as the lone striker.
Yes.
And did an absolutely incredible job. But nobody did that tactic. You always had two strikers. But Cloughie, just before kickoff, told Gary Mills, no, you're dropping back into midfield, and Gary, you're up front on your own. And nobody did that, and it was amazing. And he just come up with these little tactical masterpieces. And I remember once playing Coventry in a cup tie. Suddenly put Gary Crosby, tiniest little bloke in the team, but lightning quick, up front in a centre forward position. And nobody expected that. And it mesmerised Coventry because there was no big man to mark. And
Yes.
but he did things tactically before others.
Yes.
That's what people forget.
And coming back to the European days, it must have been wonderful for you to be working at that time and seeing this success at first hand.
What was amazing about it, truly amazing, was how they fitted that team together like a jigsaw puzzle. They bought players to play in a certain role and to fit into a certain position. A lot of managers now just buy a player because he's a good player and then think afterwards how he fits in the team. Cloughie and Taylor bought a player, and you think of that great, marvellous, what a team in 79-80. Right, the first thing you need is the best goalkeeper. So they bought Peter Shilton. I always think he's the greatest goalkeeper ever, anywhere. Amazing. So then they thought about, right, we need another centre-back. And they got two really, you need, from where I come from, you have two big, hard centre-backs, and they don't come any harder than Larry Lloyd.
No.
Larry Lloyd and Kenny. Can you imagine going out to play on a Sunday park and you're facing Larry Lloyd and Kenny Burns? You probably turn tail and run back into the...
Yes.
And then he got Archie Gemmell as a left-sided midfielder, and he built the team. They built that team, the cogs, where they fitted, and that was the skill. He knew exactly why they were buying the players, where they fit into the team, and that's why it worked.
Yes, you mentioned Peter Shilton there, and you've worked with him on a couple of books. What was that like? And also, you say in the book that you've written, it was really more underrated.
Yeah, this is something I just can't understand. I can't believe this. If I was selecting probably in my estimation, I've seen probably four great, and I'm talking about absolutely great English footballers. Tom Finney, a long time ago for some people.
Yes.
Bobby Charlton, Paul Gascoigne, and Peter Shilton. Now, whenever people talk about who was the greatest England footballer, it seems like goalkeepers don't count. But Peter Shilton got 125 caps. It should have been about 150. And he was just, and the saves he made. I mean, that Forest wouldn't have won the European Cup twice without Peter Shilton. He was the best. And, he's one of the four great English players. And you could argue for a few more, but they're four greats.
Yes. I think Clough used to say that Shilton was worth 10 or 15 points a season alone, and that was in the days when it was like 2 points for a win, which shows you how much he thought of him. Clough also couldn't believe that the England manager at the time, Ron Greenwood, couldn't decide between Shilton and Clements.
No, I couldn't. I mean, Clements was a great goalkeeper, but Shilton was the best in the world.
Yeah.
So I found that absolutely extraordinary. They used to rotate the pair of them. But Cloughie, probably the one player Cloughie really left alone and was almost in awe of was Peter Shilton, because he just let Peter do his own thing, because Peter knew what he was doing. He was the exemplary professional. He'd stay behind after training and get kids to have shooting practice with. And other players would be long back in the changing rooms having a shower, getting changed. And Peter would still be out there training, but he was a one-off.
Yes. And I think as the story goes, that's what led to Cloughie wearing the green sweater in the end, because he saw Shilton wearing a green sweater with number 1 on the back and said, hey, I'm the number 1 round here, and started wearing the green jumpers. So, but that more admiration for Shilton, really, I think, that one. In your book that you've brought out, you give some tips for new reporters. And in an interview, you say, don't always stick to a rigid list of questions, because your interview may go in an unexpected direction. I'm sure that must have happened with Cloughie when you spoke to him.
When you interviewed Cloughie, you didn't have a plan. It was ridiculous, because if you had a plan of questions, you'd be ripping them up. I mean, sometimes you'd be talking to him and it would go on to politics.
Yes.
And we'd be talking about how we need more bobbies. One of his big things, we need more bobbies on the beat. He was a really old-fashioned type of socialist, and he believed in really looking after people, looking after the community and being a member of the community. And he used to go on about that. But he'd just suddenly go off a tangent talking about something. But he was so articulate about every subject, so that you didn't know which way the conversation was going to go. So you had to sort of, be really on your toes all the time. But whatever he talked about, it was fascinating.
Yeah. With your long and great career in journalism that you had, I guess you would have seen the other teams that Clough built at Forest after the European days, and those annual Wembley trips. That must have been a wonderful time to be working as well.
It was great because that was very underrated those days, and he brought some great players in there, like Neil Webb was very underrated.
Yeah,
and of course, young Nigel. Nigel was another very underrated player. I remember when he first came along, Cloughie said to me, he said, he's not big, he's not strong, he's not quick, but he can play. But what he did have, Nigel, was terrific tactical appreciation of the game and bags of courage. Nigel was as hard as nails, I'll tell you. And he was he'd be better playing in the modern game, where he could play in that number 10 role, right, where he'd be in the England team every game in that 10 role. He was just brilliant because he could do the whole lot. He scored goals, he could drop back, thread the little passes through. But that was a really underrated team. And the other thing about that team, they were entertaining.
Yes.
He let them play. And some of those Wembley wins were fantastic. They were really, really good to watch.
Exciting times, definitely. Now, you interviewed one of Cloughie's heroes, I understand, Muhammad Ali. And I think in the book you say he was still as sharp as ever, despite the health problems he had at the time.
Yeah, that was interesting. I interviewed him once on radio when he was fully compos mentis, and that was just amazing. But even better was the interview I did actually in Nottingham with him. It was in a bookshop in Nottingham, and I sat and did this interview with Muhammad Ali, and he was starting to suffer quite badly from Parkinson's syndrome, but it was a very poignant interview, and the warmth and the awe of the man came across. He was just amazing, just being in his presence. He's the only first person, apart from Cloughie, I've ever felt in awe of. There's two people in my life I felt in awe of, Brian Clough, Muhammad Ali, and just being in Muhammad Ali's presence was just amazing. And he didn't have a mark on his face. You couldn't believe this guy's been a top boxer. Not a mark on his face, but he was so witty still. And there were some kids came in, and he pretended to spar with them, and they were just thrilled to bits. And he still had that twinkle in his eye and that wit, although he's a little bit slowed down, a bit slurred. But gosh, that was just wonderful memory.
I bet.
Yeah, Clough and Muhammad Ali.
Oh,
marvelous.
Wonderful. And among the other big names that you interviewed, and also sort of through your love of football really, helped you interview Rod Stewart. How did that come about?
Very early in my career, in about 1970, 71, I did a little bit of freelance work for the music papers, as well as on those days, I'd started on Radio Leeds, BBC Radio Leeds, where I started. And I was doing a concert review of Rod Stewart and the Faces. And I went along to the Not Knowing What to Expect. And Rod Stewart was absolutely wonderful. He welcomed me. He said, Dennis, come in, join the lads. Go and sit in the dressing room, have a drink. How are you? You're with us for the evening. Have a good time. And he said, right, for the concert, you come up on stage with us. And I sat on the stage with them while they did the concert. And then afterwards, he said, come on, Dennis, we're going to have a crack open some champagne in the dressing room. And I was just with them. And he did a marvellous interview. And part of it was about football. And because he's a mad keen Scotland and Celtic fan. And he talked about football. He had a trial for Brentford. I had a trial for Watford. He had a trial for Brentford. So we had a bit to talk about there.
Now, you also talk about the importance of developing good contacts as a reporter.
Yes.
And you managed to get some great exclusives, I remember. And it turns out it was thanks to some anonymous sources who were actually football chairmen at the clubs that the stories involved. And one club, I think, launched an investigation into how you were getting these stories. How did you handle all that?
I can't give away the club, but it was in the East Midlands.
Ooh.
It wasn't Nottingham Forest.
No.
And the chairman at the time was a lovely guy, very friendly. but open and honest. If you asked him a question, he'd give you an absolutely straight answer. You say, "Are you interested in signing that Dutch international?" "Yes, we are. We hope to sign him next week." And he'd tell you everything. And he'd often like to go and have a meal with us. We go and drop drop by and have a bit of spot of lunch together, and we'd have a chat, and he'd tell us all what was going on.
Yeah.
And we knew everything that was going on. So we were getting all these stories on ITV, exclusive about this club, things that were happening, who they were signing. But the club launched an inquiry in how ITV knew everything that was going on. What they didn't realize, it was their own chairman who was spilling the beans. And what a great bloke, because as I say, he just told it like it is. And he's a great sort of bon viveur and a great companion. It was terrific. So, we were one step ahead.
Fantastic. And then another chairman asked you for help with a big signing, I think.
Yeah, it was the manager. That's another East Midlands club, not Nottingham Forest.
Right.
And he said, we're thinking about, we don't know who to have as the manager. And he said, we're thinking of these. And I said, well, what about so-and-so? And he said, yeah. And then they went along with my choice and chose the manager I'd suggested, which was very complimentary.
Yeah.
I think he lasted a season.
Yes.
He lasted a full season.
So, which is remarkable these days. Yes. Yeah. So, it was good advice. Now, there's a real art to live reporting and football commentary in particular, something you highlight in the book. And of course, we've recently had the sad passing of John Motson. And that's a really sad loss, isn't it?
Terrible, because he had a presence and he had a method. And what everybody would learn from John Motson is that important word P, preparation. He was never caught out, was Motty, he did so much research, and he'd spend the night before a big game just swatting till he knew every fact and figure about the game and could just recall them. So research, fantastic. And he was unique, had terrific character about him. And he was just, to him, football was a religion. And I say to all these sort of young reporters, if you're going to sport, it's a religion. It's got to be, you live, eat and breathe it. And Motty did. And he produced some fabulous moments.
Yes. And also, it was very sad to hear about the death of ITV's World of Sport host, Dickie Davis, as well. Yeah.
Yes, I was on some early World of Sports with Dickie Davis. And one thing I remember doing was they did wrestling at the time, and it was the final wrestling match for Mick McManus, the wrestler. Yeah. And I did the live thing with Mick McManus into World of Sport, and had to escort him into the ring and interview him afterwards. And that was with Dickie Davis. And I did a few pieces on World of Sport. And Dickie, he was just as he appeared, real gentleman, great pro, lovely man. The sad, very, very sad part.
Yes, a legend of broadcasting. A bit like yourself, of course. From those...
No, I'm more of a legend, Marcus, than a legend.
Those wonderful days at Central TV. I used to enjoy watching you on that. But of course, talking about the famous faces that we've lost, it was really a shocking day that it was announced that Cloughie had passed away.
I couldn't believe it, because I can't remember how Cloughie, before a Forest Derby game at the City Ground, Cloughie sent a message through Nigel that he wanted to see me before the game. And that was very poignant, because I went to meet him before the game. We had a long chat sitting in the foyer in Nottingham Forest. And he wasn't well then, I could tell, but we had a long chat. And he said, it's lovely to meet you again. I was just about moved to tears, because it was just wonderful to meet up with him. He was so warm and kind to me during that. And then it wasn't so long after that he passed away. So that made it even sadder for me, because I'd had that meeting with him, and we recalled the old days and had a really warm chat togetger. And he said he always watched me on television, and oh God, that was that was a real joke. I really choked. It was very sad, very sad.
But but at least you got those lovely memories as well, which is good. Your career also had some highlights and lowlights, shall we say, which is reflected in the title of the book, Rats, Pies and Pigeon Poo. And the pies reference, I think, comes from eating a mouldy pie at a big cricket match. What was what was the background?
Well, I'm glad to say it wasn't at Trent Bridge, and it was a semi-final of one of the big cup competitions. And the sponsors had given all the press a little lunch pack. And I thought, oh, that's nice. Well, it was 28 degrees or something. It was a roasting day. Oh. Opened up the lunch pack, and there was a half bottle of white wine, which was by now lukewarm. So put that to one side. Then there was a cheese sandwich, which was totally dried up and all curled at the edges. I thought, oh, it's not very nice. But there was a pork pie. So I was the first journalist in the press box to open up my lunch pack. So I'm always a bit ravenous. So I picked up this pork pie, bit it in half, and I looked at it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was every fluorescent colour of yellow, purple, mauve, and just a sort of liquid morass of mould in the middle and penicillin. I'd eaten half of it. So I rushed downstairs and I got a double vodka from the bar and just threw it straight down my neck to hopefully that would kill off all the germs, which I think it did.
Yes.
But it was awful. But I warned all the other members of the press pack not to don't touch the pie.
A narrow escape, yes. Now, after Cloughie passed away, you helped the campaign for a statue of Cloughie in Nottingham. Yeah. And you were the MC at a fundraising gala dinner with Brian's family coming along as guests, and that was at Nottingham Council House. How special was it for you to be part of that?
Fabulous, wonderful. And it was a lovely warm evening. The people who came along, Cloughie's family and everybody there. And some of the great people like John Robertson was there and John McGovern, some of the great old stalwarts. And we had a wonderful evening. Yes. It was a celebration of the man. And luckily we raised the funds for the statue, which is a must because there's two people you associate Nottingham with, Robin Hood and Cloughie.
Yes,
a few others, but Robin Hood and Cloughie. I mean, oh wow.
Yeah, no, that was a great night, and we'll always be grateful for the help you gave then. And I think even towards the end of the event, the cast of the tribute play that was on at the Nottingham Playhouse that night came along after their performance. And you interviewed them, including the late Colin Tarrant, who was was playing Cloughie at the time.
Colin Tarrant, he was terrific in that role, and the whole cast really took it on board. They didn't just do the play it wasn't sort of like they were distanced from everything. They became a part of it.
Yes.
They became a really integral part of what was going on.
Yes.
It was so real and so very heartfelt, I thought.
Going back all those years, Dennis, can you remember the first time that you were sent to interview Cloughie and how nervous you were?
Yeah, I can. I was nervous.
Yeah.
Because this man's a legend. You know, he's the greatest legend. And they were then, Forest, in what was then League Two, the season they got promoted.
Yes.
And I went along and I was hanging around for ages. And as you often did, and then eventually he came out and said, "Young man, come in." And he said, "Would you like a drink?" And I said, "I'd like a cup of coffee, please." He said, "Very good, young man," and had a cup of coffee. And he was very good then. Oh. And it was rather like being called in front of the headmaster. You're a naughty schoolboy. Yes. You're called in front of the headmaster. And as I said, he and Muhammad Ali, the only two people I've been in awe of. And you were in awe of Cloughie because look what he'd achieved. I mean, he was just amazing. I mean, he should have been England manager, obviously. We all know that. But, great moment.
Some great memories there. And, of course, good luck with the book, which, as I say, is called Rats, Pies and Pigeon Poo. And there's more information about the book on the show notes for this episode of the podcast. Dennis Coath, thanks ever so much for sharing your memories today.
Absolutely my pleasure. I've enjoyed it immensely, Marcus.
And my thanks also go to you for listening. Don't forget there are more great Cloughie stories on the Tribute website brianclough.com, where you can also buy souvenirs and books helping good causes. If you haven't done so already, why not have a look at the back catalogue of Green Jumper podcasts? And I hope you can join me next time for more memories of the great man in the green jumper.